Hey you guys, welcome back to Rocket City Yardstead. My name is Sarah. If you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. So as you can see, I've got myself another rotisserie chicken here. If you remember last week, I mentioned that I forgot some things on my shopping trip to Sam's Club. And so I had to go back. And while I was there, they had fresh chickens. And so I went ahead and grabbed one that we could just use fresh in some meals this week. So we've already had a chicken salad. We did baby spinach with chopped up chicken, chopped apples, dried cranberries, some cashews, and a maple Dijon vinaigrette. Oh, so good. But today we're going to make chicken tetrazzini with some of our rotisserie chicken. And the first thing I need to do is get my mushrooms chopped up so that we can add them to our skillet and get them sauteing. So I did want to mention, I wash these mushrooms with a damp paper towel, which I think is, generally speaking, the recommended way to wash mushrooms. But every once in a while, you get some really dirty mushrooms, and I just don't subscribe to that whole you can't run mushrooms under water thing. I think that might be true if you're going to eat them fresh. But if you're going to saute them, any water that they might take on, it's pretty minimal, and you're going to cook all of that water out anyway. So if your mushrooms are really dirty, just run them under some water. It's not going to hurt anything. We are going to saute these onions in a little bit of butter and a little bit of oil and just get them nicely cooked before we add any other ingredients. I am going to get a couple of tablespoons of butter, as well as just a little bit of oil into my pan here. If you don't know, butter has a tendency to burn the milk solids in it, and so just a little oil that has a high smoke point. I'm using avocado oil. That will help keep your butter from burning. I'm going to let this butter melt and heat up. This is going to go pretty quickly for me because I have an induction cooktop, and it's one of my favorite things about my induction cooktop is that it heats so quickly. Also required quite a bit of a learning curve early on. But this is getting nice and melted and bubbly, and so I'm going to add our mushrooms. I added probably close to a pound of mushrooms here. And I am going to add a little bit of salt because that will help draw the moisture out of our mushrooms, because that's what we're going for here in this saute. Oh, I missed a whole mushroom, you guys. Better chop this one up. We really love mushrooms in our house, and so I just slice them. If you like the flavor of mushrooms, but maybe you don't like the texture of mushrooms, you could chop these much finer so you're not getting a big chunk of mushroom when you eat your chicken tetrazzini. But for us, this is going to work just fine. I am tossing these around quite a bit because I want to get all of them coated in the oil, and then I'm going to leave them alone to saute. And while these are sauteing, I'm going to get to chopping up the chicken. I think I will mostly use chicken breast for this meal, but we'll see how much we get. We ate most of the other chicken breast when we had salad. Ooh. Somebody recommended to me in my comment section for the video where I talked about canning rotisserie chicken, that they actually buy whole rotisserie chickens and freeze them whole. That had never occurred to me, but they said they put them in their crock pot when they want to eat them with a little bit of water, and it heats the whole chicken through and they don't dry out. I thought that sounded like a fantastic idea. Do you guys have ways you like to use rotisserie chickens in meals? I like them for quick soups or chilies. They're great in something like this, or like a chicken Alfredo. But what else? Tacos. In the summer, when I have a ton of peppers and tomatoes and things coming in from the garden, I like to make fajitas with them. I'll saute up the veggies really quickly, and then I will add the chicken just to heat it through. And it's a nice, quick meal when you're so busy during the summer months with the garden. So I've got all of the chicken chopped up now that we're going to put in our chicken tetrazzini. I'm guessing this is somewhere between 2 and 3 cups. I'm going to grab a measuring cup and measure it. If you're new, you will learn. I tend to measure with my heart and with my eyes and just eyeball things, but let's get an accurate measurement for you guys. You guys, I'm pretty good with my eyeball. I said between 2 and 3 cups, and it is exactly 2.5 cups. So I feel pretty good about that eyeballing situation. So this is ready to go once our sauce all comes together. Let's check on our mushrooms. These are looking great. All of that beautiful color on them. So I'm just gonna give them a little stir. Let the other side pick up some color. But these are looking fantastic. Our mushrooms are about ready. And so I am working on getting this Pinot Grigio open. I will tell you, you see in recipes, and I watch a lot of cooking vlogs and things like that, where they tell you to buy a wine that you like to drink. That is great advice if you like dry wine. I am not a fan. I never have been. I'm not a big drinker in general. And so you can just leave, let's make a mess too. You can just leave the wine out and use extra of a different liquid. However, I do notice that the depth of flavor is better with some wine. So I couldn't tell you if the wine I use is a good drinking wine because I don't like dry wine. And so I normally just end up going with like the $4 bottle of wine, to be totally honest with you. But if you are someone who genuinely likes drinking dry wine, pick one you like. Our mushrooms are looking beautiful. So we are going to add about 1/3 cup of this white wine. We're just going to let it cook down, simmer with our mushrooms here for a second. Get some of that color off the bottom of our pan. And all that does for us is add some flavor. So now I am going to add a whole lot of butter. We need this to thicken our sauce. So in total, I am using about a stick of butter for this. We're gonna let this melt down, add about 5 cloves of minced garlic. We're just going to let that cook for just a little bit while our butter is finishing melting. Let it saute for just a few seconds. Our garlic's been cooking for probably about a minute, and so now I am going to add about 1/3 cup of flour. If you've been around, you know I like to use oat flour in applications like this because I am making this gluten-free. If you don't need to be gluten-free, all-purpose flour would work just fine here. If you don't have oat flour, use whatever gluten-free flour you would normally use. So for me, I typically have the oat flour on hand, and I also tend to have Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1 flour. You could use that as well. Just any, all-purpose gluten-free flour, if you need to be gluten-free, would work. I grind my own oat flour up in my Vitamix blender, and so it's much more economical than any of the other kind of gluten-free blends, and it works fantastic for thickening things. So I try to save my more expensive gluten-free flours for things where I really need them. I almost forgot about our spaghetti. So while this is doing its thing, I'm going to get a pot of water on to boil for the spaghetti. While that pot's filling up, the oat flour mixture is ready for us to add liquid. I have about 4 cups of chicken broth here. You can use whatever kind of broth you want. Any kind of poultry broth would work. I'm using homemade broth. You can use store-bought broth in this if that's what you have. We're also going to add about 1 cup of cream. A lot of recipes call for milk in this. I use more broth and then I use cream because I don't handle the lactose very well in the milk. But cream seems to do okay for me. So we're going to get this all mixed together nicely. Let it come to a boil and thicken. And at that point, we can add our chicken. All right. Get our pot on the stove. Get our water boiling. You could add onion to this. You could, I think there's a lot of ways you could make this more your own. I am going to go ahead and add a little bit more salt to this because I'm sure we're going to need it, and some pepper. And then once it's nice and thickened with all of our ingredients, we'll give it a taste test. I don't want to overdo it. But one of the things I'm going to do today that I don't always do when I make a pasta dish like this is I have some baby spinach in the fridge that I need to use up. And so, well, it's not traditional for a chicken tetrazzini. I'm going to throw some spinach in here and let it wilt. And this will really be a one-pot meal. You guys, I'm going to be real with you. It's really easy when you make YouTube videos to cut out the unappealing, kind of ugly stuff, right? But I'm going to show you what just happened. My sleeve caught on my bottle of wine. And there we go. Broken wine bottle. There are shards all over the place. I don't think the camera picks it up really well. I had to stand still while my mom came out and cleaned up an area for me to walk through where it would be safe so I could get my feet all cleaned up and dry and put some shoes on. So I can now clean up the shards of glass. So I'm going to be cleaning that up while I finish dinner. It's real life, right? I mean, this happens to everybody at some point. So I figure nobody's perfect and we show the imperfections because it is what it is. Now that the floor is all cleaned up, our sauce is looking fantastic. Our water is boiling. I added some salt. I'm going to add just a little bit of oil. I know they say you don't need to do that for wheat pasta, but I am using brown rice spaghetti, and I find that it is very starchy and it does boil over if you don't keep a very close eye on it. And the oil helps with that. So I add oil to the spaghetti. But I am going to cook this probably like 4 minutes less than what the package calls for. So it calls for 9 to 10 minutes. I'm probably going to cook this for about 6 minutes because I have found that with baked pastas, following the cook until just al dente does not work as well as it does with a regular wheat pasta. They tend to get a little bit mushy in the oven. Because of that, we are going to cook this for even less time than most recipes call for when making a baked pasta. So we'll just let these noodles cook. And I think that sauce is about ready for us to give it a taste test. Okay, let's give this a taste. It's delicious. It was worth cleaning up that bottle of wine off the floor and all the glass for that extra layer of flavor it gives. I am going to add a little bit more black pepper, and I think that's really all it needs. So with only 4 minutes left for the pasta, I'm going to go ahead and actually add our chopped chicken and some of that baby spinach so that we're adding some veggies to our meal. Pop our chicken in. Make sure we get all of it. Oops. I needed to wash my hands before I go handling spinach. This is pre-washed organic baby spinach, so I'm just going to throw several handfuls in our pot and on the floor. Because as we all know, this amount of spinach will cook down to just about nothing, really. It smells so good in here. And not just because it smells like wine, because it does smell like wine. Speaking of smelling like alcohol, I had to run to Lowe's, I think it was yesterday. And I have seen where they have the whiskey barrels before that you can buy as planters, but these actually had a placard on them that said Jack Daniel's Distillery. And we actually only live about an hour away from Jack Daniel's Distillery, so maybe that's why they have ones from there. But I was walking through the area where they had those, and the smell of whiskey was overwhelming. So they were used Jack Daniel's whiskey barrels. We actually went and did the tour once of the distillery. And I can't remember which one of my nieces it was, but she was very small at the time, 2, 3 years old. And we went into the distillery room. Maybe it was the room where they have all of the barrels that are aging. And it's a tour with a whole bunch of people. And she was like, oh, it stinks in here. Everybody chuckled. So I don't think she was the only one who felt that way. This is looking great. And our noodles are about ready. So I'm going to take these over to the stove and drain them, and then we will add them to our sauce. All right, so let's pop our spaghetti in here. Get it all mixed in. Now this is just going to be for me and my mom, and we will thoroughly enjoy having leftovers of this meal for multiple meals. But I like cooking it in this enamel brazier just because I think it's really pretty for serving if you were having a bigger gathering, you had friends and family over, or even just if you have a bigger family, that would eat this all in one sitting. I think it's a really pretty way to serve it. Have it sitting on the table where everybody can serve themselves family style. Now we are going to add about a cup of grated Parmesan cheese to the top of this. Make sure we break up the little bits that have clumps. And also some gluten-free breadcrumbs. If you're unfamiliar, I'm a big fan of this brand of gluten-free breadcrumbs. The ingredients are rice flour, raisin juice, concentrate, honey, and salt. You really can't get much cleaner than that as far as an ingredient list goes. Because I added the breadcrumbs, I do want to add a little fat to the top of them, but I don't want too much. So I'm going to use my little sprayer here and just pump a little oil over the top to help get them nice and crispy in the oven. So now that this is all put together, we're going to pop it into a 400-degree oven for probably around 30 minutes. We just want it to be nice and bubbly and hot, and for the cheese and the breadcrumbs to be nice and browned. So into the oven it goes. Went and grabbed some parsley from the garden so we could garnish our chicken tetrazzini. Our chicken tetrazzini is all done, so let's dig in here and give it a try. Try not to take too much of the topping. It smells amazing. I love this dish. Mm. Mm-mm-mm. It's been a very long day, and I'm really hungry. And this is hitting the spot just right. It's so good. That little bit of wine, I don't know what it is. I think actually, now that I think about it, this is a really rich dish, and the wine adds some acidity to it. And I think it just adds some balance. But so good. If you've never made chicken tetrazzini, I would highly recommend it. And I like the spinach in here. Mm-hmm. I've never added the spinach before. I thought it would go well, but that was sort of just, on the fly. I had it in the fridge. Let's add it. And it's a really nice addition. So add another meal to the things you can do with rotisserie chicken. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.